developments on this was that there were suggestions from notable CISOs that before a CISO, Miss Lily's here. Hi, Lily.
Hey, hi everyone. Good evening.
We're live already. Yeah. Arlene, go ahead. Magandang hapon mga Kapix Pro.
Good afternoon, mga Kapix Pro. It's Friday.
Good afternoon. Oh my God, na-miss ko kayong lahat. Ang tagal kong nawala. So glad to be here.
Ang pagbabalik with the blast, BPC.
Yes. Right, so...
By the way, VP Sheila and AD Arlene, we're live not just from Manila, but also from Singapore, since we will be joined by our guest speakers and presenters today, and they will be introduced properly later. So without much ado, I'll give the floor first to Reese and then to Arlene for our introductions. Press Reese.
Alright, magandang hapon mga Kapix Pro. Na-miss namin kayo. And we're back. I would like to, before we introduce the topic, let me introduce first our speaker for today. So he is Mr. Kenneth, the Principal Security Engineer for Identity Exposure for Tenable. And in his current role, he specializes in fostering awareness of Active Directory and identity exposure and the importance of closing the gaps that led to breaches rather than just treating the symptoms of attacks. So prior to Tenable, he spent years as a premier field engineer in Microsoft and Alcid, where he worked on Azure and Azure AD in the early days of cloud technology, helping customers to build and maintain Active Directory. He also had the opportunity to foster and build the partners ecosystem across APJ. He has a strong track record in incident response, Active Directory, assessment, and training customers along with internal employees in Azure and identity security. So welcome, Mr. Kenneth Teo, and welcome to the Tenable team. VP Sheila?
Yeah, thank you, Press Reese. Let me also introduce the other Tenable people that we have here. So we have our solution specialist for identity exposure, Mr. Alvin Yo.
Hi,
And
hello.
We also have our regional marketing director, Ms. Lily Low. And also our very own, the one supporting me for Philippines, our systems engineer, Marlon Hino-Hino.
Magandang hapon.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for inviting the Tenable team. So we have the full power of our identity exposure group here. Hopefully, this will be a very meaningful discussion today. ED Arlene, would you like to introduce the PixPro team as well before we start the session?
Okay, on our end po, of course, we have our national president, President Reese Balbastro, who actually celebrated her birthday. Maipasok lang, happy birthday, Press Reese. Of course, our BOD and our past president, Sir Ace Ashley Asedillo. And of course, VP Sheila, who happens to be for this particular episode, dalawa ang kanyang hats. The Tenable team, for the Tenable team, of course, and for the PixPro team. So if I may, Press Reese, may I introduce a topic that we will be discussing for this KC episode this Friday?
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is actually a very interesting topic because cyber attacks and attacks are very common nowadays, especially in the purview of the technology and the modernization that we have over the internet. But in terms of attack paths, how does Tenable work for us to be able to, of course, identify exposure and to disrupt kung ano man yung cyber attacks na meron tayo sa ngayon. And for this afternoon, let Tenable and their team help us and educate us on how we identify, how we manage, and of course, eliminate attack paths, ensuring that the attackers that are commonly victimizing everybody over online and the internet, and how the solution coming from Tenable works for everybody. So let me give the floor to the entire Tenable team.
All right, you have it, guys.
Yeah, thank you, ED Arlene. Before Kenneth starts his insight sharing today, maybe let's just remind our audience that there will be a question and answer. So Kenneth will be asking a few questions, and whoever answers correctly later on will be getting a Tenable merchandise, care of Lily. All right. So yeah, Kenneth, take it away.
Or listen,
Right, and
take note.
thank you. Just sharing my screen right now. Hey, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Right, so throughout the presentation, if I have trouble with my voice or the presentation is not working, just let me know and interrupt me. And thank you, PixPro, for inviting us into the live discussions on how do we identify and disrupt attack path. And most importantly, how can we disrupt them before they can be exploited? So my name is Kenneth. I'm a principal security engineer, as someone introduced me just now. And today we'll be talking about this particular topic, as well as doing some demo as well throughout this presentation. So without further ado, I'll just jump straight to the next slide. So today, the quick agenda for us is the modern attack and the exposures of the modern attack framework and attack surface, right? So what we really wanted to do is we have heard in the news, whatever newspaper that you have or online and in TV or even in online media, that you generally would heard about attack. But most of the time you heard about it because someone had suffered an attack and it is being broadcasted. But there are also a lot of attack that is not being reported, right? So we want to look into why an attack happened and how do we stop them before it can happen, right? So that's the first thing that we'll do in today's agenda. The second thing that we want to discuss today would be on the attacker's perspective. It would be very interesting to look at what an attacker thinks, how they think, and how they operate when it comes to attacking a particular organization, especially in terms of what do they do, what kind of tools that they are using to find loopholes in an organization or in a network until they reach to a point where data exfiltration is possible and they show up in the news, right? So we want to look at how that works as well from an attacker's perspective. The third thing that we will do today is to look at proactive APA, or in long, it also means attack path analysis, right? So you will be looking at a new term, looking at new technology in terms of what is attack path analytics. Traditionally, you have heard of antivirus, you have heard of vulnerability management, configuration management, and so on and so forth. But today we'll look at a new way to look into attack path exposure, which is what we call in Tenable as attack path analysis. We'll give you some examples on how we achieve that, some top use cases, and obviously during that use case discussion, we'll talk about some demo. And finally, as Sheila has mentioned, we will do a little bit of Q&A at the end. So throughout the presentation, we have some questions. So please pay attention. There would be 3 questions and we'll show it up and you have a chance to respond, and Lily will give you your prize if you answer them correctly. Okay, so I think there's a background. Sure. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So first, before we go into or jump into before I tell you what is attack path analysis, can you describe what is attack path analysis? Right. So if you go and Google search that, you definitely find some answer. But the written answer from ChatGPT is just giving you a description, but what does it really mean, right? So that's the first questions that we want to answer for you in a couple of minutes. But if you can write them down, your answer in the chat box, that would be great. We'll be able to look through that with you for you later on. Now, the first thing is what type of problem we're trying to solve. So organizations today are under siege with a lot of exposures, right? So if you look at a typical organization, like let's say a bank, right? So a bank has an application, whether it is on an Android application, whether it is a web application, whether it is an Apple iOS application, that is only the consumer-facing side of the application. The bank also have backend application, right? The HR has their own application that they would use to create new staff account. And as you can imagine, there will be thousands of servers, hundreds of thousands of workstations. Every employee has a web laptop or workstations that they have when they work in the company. Now, all of this would have certain type of vulnerabilities for sure. There's no way that all the vulnerabilities are being covered, right? Especially when you look at the stats. You have 350 new CVEs published every week, right? So that's every week you have new CVEs. So then the question would be, can my team or can the security team manage this? Is this new CVE important enough for me to take an action on, right? Is this CVE affecting my organization, right? Not all CVEs are going to be relevant to you, right? You might have a CVE because you are using an open source solution out there, and the open source solutions is suffering this CVE. But you might not be using this application. How do you track what application you are on? What application has suffering the CVE? And if you talk about application, there are versions, different versions as well. So all of these questions should be answered with vulnerability management solutions like what Tenable offers, right? You also have new domains. So if you're not familiar with domains, domains are where your identity are being based on. In general, there are 600 new domains created every minute, including test, UAT, production domain. All of these domains has vulnerabilities. They have users, they have staff information, and they have configurations vulnerability as well, right? As I said, it's very hard to keep track of all these new domains that is being created too. Now, when we talk about new domains, 80% of the organizations that has been audited had critical AD misconfiguration. That aligned with our customer base as well. Most of our customers that use Tenable product, and especially Tenable Identity Exposure Vulnerability Management, have an identified 80% of critical misconfigurations for AD. Now, these are not due to a CV issue. These are due to misconfiguration, whether it is by an employee, whether it is by an application that you install, and the application changes things automatically. So those are some of the configurations that a lot of customers having a hard time to track. You have 250 million cloud misconfiguration each day. This is about cloud application, right? So the website that you use to view the live stream like Zoom is a cloud application, right? So all this cloud application has misconfiguration as well. So if your organization has cloud development and cloud organizations or cloud development and cloud application, you might have or you would have cloud misconfigurations every day. Finally, you have 66% of organizations hit by ransomware in 2021, right? 66% of international organizations hit by ransomware in 2021. Like I said previously, some of them get reported in the news because they are significant enough, but a lot of times they are not being reported in the news as well. Maybe because they have a very small subset are being suffered, maybe a one somewhere, and they don't want to bother the news. So those are some of the unreported ransomware out there as well. So the questions are, if the organizations are under siege, right, do you have adequate resources to cover them? And how do you prioritize and conquer them? And finally, are you continuously reacting to new configuration, new misconfiguration, and new vulnerabilities? So basically, attackers have more options than ever, right? You have your on-prem and remote IT, which is the first column. This is the first very, very traditional IT findings, right? So on-prem servers, remote IT, VPNs, you work from home, you have remote IT, right? So those are relatively easy to manage, right? If you know about it, if you know about the CVEs, you have solutions out there to help you to find out what are the CVEs that you are being affected. There will be unknown as well. For example, for large organizations, there are a lot of times you have old URLs, right? Even in Tenable, we have a bunch of old URLs because of our previous acquisitions, right? For example, 𝐿SAID.com, Symptom.com, all those old URL may have been forgotten, and you might want to find them out. And we do have a solutions to help you to find old URL and old DNS, like shadow IT and forgotten assets in the organization. The attacker also have top 10 OWASP for web application, right? Common web exploits, SQL injection attack, cross-site scripting attack, misconfigurations on web applications are some of the things that attackers would also be interested with. Because it's a web application, it's published online, if you are suffering SQL injection, that's the first thing that they will do to attack your environment. Then if you come to public cloud, you have cloud misconfigurations, improper rights. So there was a company out there very, very recently that allow everyone permission to delete something from their cloud storage, right? So the particular company is using an AWS services, and because of improper configurations, the AWS service allow almost everyone as a customer to be able to delete something from their AWS storage, right? So that's cloud misconfiguration. So those are some of the identity stuff that we want to figure out. CSPM, cloud security platform management, but not platform, posture management, right? So those are some of the things that we want to help you with, or some of the things that attackers are focusing on as well. Are your public cloud, are your cloud configurations having a proper posture? Posture here means, are you setting up the network correctly? Are you setting up your public cloud services correctly? Are they within the boundary definitions? Right, so those are public cloud services. And then you have your OT, and then you have your AD, which is your identity, right? As you can see, the key takeaway here is attacker have more option than ever when it comes to attacking an organization. An organization will have all this, right? A typical organization will have 80% of this. Let's take a look at bank as my previous example. The bank would have a traditional IT. The bank might have some unknown DNS. The bank definitely would have a web application online. Some banks now are moving to the public cloud, so they would need help and they would be exposed to this type of vulnerability for public cloud. Bank definitely have OT, right? Your ATMs, your money printing machine, money counting machine, those are part of OT, so they definitely have that as well. They definitely would have AD because you need AD for identity management, right? So most organizations have all of this, and the vulnerabilities for all of this are more than ever, all right? Now, with all these problems that we have exposed to you right now, all the potential problem that you may face, attackers has to be more sophisticated, right? They need to figure out how to exploit one of the configurations from this slide and exploit the next thing, how they can use, for example, traditional IT CVEs so that they can extract data from your public cloud, or how they can jump from your web application with SQL injection and to extract data from your AD, right? All of those connections are what we call as attack path. How can we jump from one point unrelated to my AD until I can extract something from my Active Directory? So we call this an attack path. And when we come to attack path analysis, we want to analyze the attack path on that. So what is Tenable's view on attack path analysis? So what we want to do is we want to find exposure on your business critical assets. So business critical assets are your workstations, your laptop, your PCs. We want to find out how critical each thing are. your workstation used by the secretary or by an intern may be less critical than the workstation that the CEO is using, right? A server that is hosting a back-end solutions may be less critical than a server that is front-facing, which is serving websites, serving web applications to the general public, right? So those are what we call as the business critical assets. And then we have asset relations, right? So Tenable view on attack path analysis will consider your asset criticality as well as your asset relation, which is this part. How are your assets related to each other, right? So for example, is your domain controller related to another server? If my server get exposed and get attacked, would that affect my other critical assets like my domain controllers? So those are the asset relations that we will consider when it comes to attack path analysis. The third thing that we do is identity, access, and permission. So our view will consider identity, right? Obviously, you have your domain admin, you have your normal user, you have your interns. So we have a map that show you how this identity gets, how their relationship and how they interact within the organization and their interaction, whether those interactions expose your environment to attack, which is the final part, the exposure part, right? So how we do this is we have our own Tenable research team, and we also utilizes MITRE ATT&CK when it comes to combining this into a contextual data with Tenable AD. Contextual data here means the data is going to be with context. So we don't want to just show you a bunch of data without any context. So we want to tell you these are the dangerous configuration, and these are the evidence. I will show you in the demo later on. And these are the evidence that we have about these vulnerabilities. We have the correlation here as well, because we don't want to just tell you a very generic report. What are your vulnerabilities? We want to help you to correlate them so that it is really what we think it is within your organization. And then we help you to prioritize that, right? So like I said, not every workstation and server and users are created equal. Some of them are more important than another. So here we'll help you to prioritize that with Tenable Tenable APA. So as an example, how do we use attack path analysis for better business risk decision? So let's consider someone, Joe, and Joe is working from home, right? Joe at workfromhome.com. And as you can tell from the animation, he's actually working from home right now. Now, working from home has its own pros and cons. Obviously, you can wake up at 9 and jump to a call at 9:30, right? But there are also cons, right? So it is easier to target people working from home because they are using their own public Wi-Fi or their home Wi-Fi. Maybe their router is being exploited and they have some bad guy and organized crime within and listening to their routers that they can use to exploit. So ransomware malware like CVE 2021-1566 may have affected the workstation of this user. Now, since he's working from home and he's working on behalf of organizations, he might have been a member of a remote user group because this guy needs access to a server within the organization. And maybe he's part of the AD user group. And this AD user group is authorized to access an RDP sessions on a very critical Windows app server. And this web server is storing the domain admin privilege, right? Now you can do elevation, right? Because this web server also stored, and maybe another user, which a domain admin, is accessing the same web server as well. Now this web server here is being exploited because there is Joe that can extract the server information, and there is a domain admin that also RDP into the server, whereby Joe will be able to extract those tickets, the credential of that domain admin. And finally, you have your AD domain controllers. So this is one major breach pathway being detected, right? So we have a Joe that is working from home. Joe is suffering for a ransomware. This information will be part of your APA. Joe is a member of AD user group. This information will be part of the ATA. And it is part of Critical Windows app. And the Critical Windows app is allowing domain admin to monitor and to log in. That information is also part of the APA until the end where it can reach the AD domain controller. So this is an example of how we utilize APA to help you to figure out what type of pathways an attacker would take when it comes to attacking the environment, right? So without APA, it is very hard for us to identify how can we enter the AD environment, right? So if I compromise Joe, if I manage to phish Joe via ransomware or via different type of method, how can I use or exploit Joe's account to enter and to control, take over my AD domain? So without APA, you have to do it manually, right? You have to draw in a whiteboard and go into each of this server and figure out what type of configuration they have. And attackers are much more sophisticated than this, right? They can have their own open source tool. They can have their own tool to figure this out quickly as well. So what we want to do is be ahead of the attacker, figure this out before the attacker can figure out, and try to find out where they can do what they can do. So question number 2. So the first question is, what is APA? What do you think APA is? Hopefully you found the answer. Question number 2 here is, where do you think attackers usually like to target? Oh, sorry, there's a lot of typo here. But anyway, so where do you think attackers usually like to target, right? So here's your questions. Where do you think attackers usually like to target first when it comes to vulnerabilities and cyber exposure? Right, moving on. Now you have your VPN services here, and also you might have your OT network. Now, just now, it was a very simple attack path, right? So, but we can expand it because your critical web servers may have access to your OT network with a trust relationship across domain. Now that expand the node and expand the problem a little bit here, right? So we have expanded from a very typical IT-based vulnerability, and we expand them into OT environment because of this critical vulnerabilities here, right? So the attack path would help you to identify that, right? So now, if you can look here, 3 data sets, 2 catastrophic breach pathways detected. So we have 3 types of data sets. One is from the AD data sets, one is from the OT data sets, and one is from the VM data sets here. And we have identified 2 catastrophic breach pathways detected. Now that is because we relate back to this slide just now. All right, so 3 findings, right? One is from the traditional IT finding. The second one is from the OT vulnerability finding. And the third one is from the AD vulnerability finding. Now, combining all of this together gives you this one, right? This attack path. And that's how we in Tenable utilizes attack path analysis to find out all the possible ways of attacking the environment. Okay. All right. So what are the real world scenario? We talk about some imaginary scenario, but there would be some this is a recent banking breach, vulnerability and infrastructure risk. So first, there is a vulnerable workload exploited. I'm sure some of you have heard Log4j, right? So Log4j was used to create a misconfigurations on the compute resources. Now, this compute resource is on the cloud. It's a cloud service. And that becomes overly permissive IAM policies, right? Now, if you can recognize this piece, this is the CSPM, the Cloud Services Posture Management. If you have Tenable, here we would have identified this overly permissive IAM solution. Obviously, then you have an unencrypted database for people to take over, right? So this is an example of a recent banking breach started with Log4j, which is 100% preventable if you have the appropriate data, misconfigured compute resources, overly permissive IAM, which is also 100% preventable. and finally encrypted database get extracted. Right, so over here you have all of this from VM, identity, and CSPM help you to do that. Now, let's look at some of the top use cases. Right, so just a tip for you, the questions after this is related to top use cases, so you might want to pay attention to that. So the first top use cases here, or demo that I want to run, is how do we prioritize attack path with the highest risk of infiltrating a network by utilizing your organization's contextual data, right? Very mouthful. So let's look at that. So when it comes to demo, I have to log in. There go. Thanks. Sign in. So in Tenable 1, which is where we on Tenable APA attack path analysis, you can see from here. We have collected data from a lot of different places, from Tenable Identity Exposure, Tenable Cloud Services, Tenable Vulnerability Management, Tenable OT, to build you this graph, which I'm going to show you. Now, this graph is very simple to use. I have already bookmarked a query, so I'm just click here and we'll look at that in a bit. And let me just search again here. It's a bit messy, but I think we would have a way to do this a bit nicer. Okay. Okay, and if I could just zoom in here, right? You can see we have built a attack path from a user, right? And you can see from here the query on the left-hand side here. Let's try to zoom out a little bit. In this better, right? So on the left-hand side here, you can see I have put in a source from a specific user. Maybe Able is working from home. I want to see if there is any risk for Able to work from home because I want to disrupt the attack path. I don't want Able to work from home first and then being exploited and figure out what's wrong. So I want to figure out if I want to allow Able to work from home, or if I want to fix issues affecting Able before I allow him to work from home, right? So that's the specific assets. And then I put in the target here on the top, the bottom left corner, is a specific assets. I put in DC admin, domain controller, administrator. So over here, you can see Able is a user and he has full control on a domain group policy, right? Default domain control policies. So since it's a domain control policies, it will affect the domain controller. And the domain controller also has a VM IP here. So the domain controller is hosted on a domain controller VM at 10.200.200.4. And you can see there's a crown here, means this is already a crown jewel, right? So this is something that we can exploit already. And then because it's storing the else.conf domain and it's managing the domain control VM, it is also managing the domain controller admin, the DC admin, another crown here. So overall, there is a risk. And in fact, there is 5 different risks here. If you can, I can zoom in for you. There's 5 different risks associated with Able. Now, do I really want him to work from home without fixing this? Not really, right? So we can use attack path to figure that out before we want to allow him to work from home. Now, the attack path is very, very flexible when it comes to identifying issues. So if you look here, let me just zoom in a little bit. If you look here, the query, you can choose what type of query you want to use. You can go back here, use the query builder, use the source and target, and you can even put attack technique, or if you know the attack technique, based on the CVE issues here as well, right? Very simple to use. We'll come back to here later on to look at that if you have more time. Okay, so that would be the first use case, right? So prioritizations. How do we prioritize which user with the attack path? Oops, sorry. The second one is how do we determine the total impact of the vulnerability, identity, or asset? So This is the second total impact demo, right? Now, if you look back at the demo just now, here, right? If you look back at the demo just now, we have a couple of users, right? So I want to know what else Able can do. So I can use this blast radius, right? Right click here, blast radius, and it will tell me what other risks Able would have, right? Using the blast radius. Or what I can do is I can go back to the findings and I can use, if you don't like the graph, if you don't like visualization, you can use this finding here to help you to figure out what you would want to remediate first. Because over here, we have priority. Priority like critical priority, high priority, things that you might want to fix because they are affecting multiple users. You can click here and it will tell you what other users are being affected, right? You can, like I said, context is very important in today's modern architecture or modern vulnerability management, right? So you can go to view details and it will tell you how many users are affected right over here. You can also see evidence. Why do we think this is a problem? Because your domain user has these permissions on the Active Directory. And we give you some detection guidance and what are the malware that someone could use to exploit this misconfiguration. So this is the context that we mentioned just now. We don't want to just tell you you have a problem, but we can give you more details based on the current information that we collect from your Active Directory or other area in your network, right? And we help you to prioritize that because we know what assets you have and what assets you have and what type of priority you have assigned to each of them, right? And obviously you can choose your priority is equal to high or medium, and you can apply, and you'll be able to sort out what you need to feed, how or what you need to remediate, right? So that's how we help you to show you a total impact, right? What would be, how do you determine your impact, vulnerability, identity, or assets based on that? The third thing that we want to do when it comes to top use cases is how do we defend against ransomware threats, right? So the previous two use cases are great because it helped me to prioritize what attack path I need to disrupt. How do I prioritize what assets to remediate or to patch, maybe? The third use cases are maybe some of the security team are very concerned with, like ransomware. So how do we figure out if my environment, if my network, if my lab is suffering, can be suffered or can be exploited with ransomware? So if you go back to Discover, right, and scroll down a little bit, there is some pre-built query ransomware, right? And I can click any of this, one of the most popular one like Ryuk ransomware. I can click on it and it will tell me, it seems like Bobby Riley is a member of administrators and he has an admin of DCVM, but most importantly, there are some configuration in DC01 and this user that allow a lateral movement and SMB Windows admin share to happen. I can click on this vulnerability and I can open this up and I can show you from here, this is a lateral movement tactic used by a subcategory of technique called SMB window share and used by usually used by Ryuk ransomware. And here I come with the description, why we think it's a problem. And these are the evidence you have, right? It's a member of admin, DC01 listen to incoming connections on port 445. And this usually are used by or are commonly used by ransomware group like the Ryuk ransomware. But obviously this is a lab, so you don't see a lot of attack path here. But when it comes to a real scenario, you might be able to find very interesting other type of queries like Rebel ransomware, Maze ransomware attack, and some other ones. Right, you can see some of them are actually in gray, so which means that in my environment I don't have problem that identifiable to this other ransomware group, but I have some common misconfiguration that Maze, Ryuk, or Revel are interested with, or they are known to use these misconfigurations to attack an organization. Okay, so far, so far we have covered that top 3 use cases, which is prioritize attack path, again, determine the total impact of vulnerability, identity, or asset, and defend against top ransomware threats. This is some of the use cases our customers, our users are using APA for their own use. Okay, now that's the end. We've done the ransomware demo. So question number 3, what are the 3 use cases we have just discussed, right? So I told you to pay attention on the top use cases we talked about. So if you can tell us what are 3 use cases you saw just now, if you can remember them, type it out. And again, there will be a prize at the end. Now, the benefits of an exposure management platform, right, is obviously improve your security posture, because we want to improve your security posture. We don't want too much vulnerability to be exposed. We want to help you to prioritize, because there are so many vulnerabilities. How do I know which one to remediate first? Right, simplified management. You have a large organization, you have different departments. We don't want each department to use different areas or different solutions. So we help you to simplify them, single management, single platform, and expose everything in that Tenable One platform. Unified reporting, improve integration. So integration with your SIEM, your reporting structures, your ticketing system, all can be done. Obviously, cost effective and reduce complexity is the most important one, because if you have different solutions to cover your OT, if you have different solutions to cover your AD vulnerabilities, if you have different solutions to cover your vulnerability management in your traditional IT, it introduces complexity because they don't talk to each other, and we can't help you to build a reliable APA. So with Tenable One, we combine all those data together to reduce the complexity for you to reduce vulnerability. Now, with that, we have about 15 minutes left for a Q&A. And yeah, I'm going to pass this back to the organizer. And how do we want to do this? Right. Is there any questions from the Q&A? Oh, yeah. Just stop sharing.
Yeah, hi. So before we check the questions, maybe we can greet first our live audience for tonight. Yeah, let's check.
Hello, everybody.
Yan, magandang hapon. Yan natin ang mga, nandito sila BP Ruby. I think Mr. Chair is also watching. Magandang hapon, Mr. Chair. Press Alan from our Bacolod chapter is also watching. Give a shout out lang to our Tenable team in MSPH. They're also watching. 𝐥𝐝𝐞𝐬𝐿. Arlene, can you check the rest?
Okay, good afternoon din po to Lijan, magandang hapon. To our president from Bacolod chapter, Mr. Alan Paculan, isang magandang Pro afternoon to you. Jimbo Figueroa, good afternoon. Sir Rod Quinto from the Cyber Battalion is also watching with us. Rosa L, good afternoon po. By the way, mga Pro, question number 1 is already posted po sa ating stream.
May gusto ring magpabate. So good afternoon, according to Sian Idia. Greetings from Digital Defenders, Cybersecurity and IT Solutions. Magandang hapon sa iyo, sir.
Magandang hapon. DP Ricky, magandang hapon. He's also watching. And I think may mga sagot na tayo.
Yes. We have Miss Elenita Diaz from Cebu. Hello from Cebu. Yung iba pong hirap basahin naka-Japanese character, pero magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
All right. Ang question natin again is, what does APA stand for? Yan. So again, for the mechanics, let's use hashtag #PixPro10th year and your answer. And again, the organizer's timestamp will prevail, no? Kasi minsan nag-iiba-iba yung ano eh. Alright. Ayan. VP Ruby, pwede daw ba sumagot?
Do we have a winner?
Arlene,
So
can you check the if you
Ah.
have winner already?
For, I don't know if my screen po kasi ang lumabas na unang sumagot, I see. Miss Lan, kindly check, is it Mr. Paul Balaguer?
Yeah, same.
Hashtag #PixPro 10th year attack path analysis. Is this the correct answer po ba?
Yes po, Paul.
Paul Balaguer. So congratulations.
All right.
Okay.
That's our first winner, Mr. Paul Balaguer.
Congratulations.
Define what APA stands for, or Attack Path Analysis.
Correct. Good afternoon also to VP Carms from our NCR chapter.
Hi, VP Carmela. Good afternoon.
Sir Ryan Bendiola. Nag-shoutout siya to VP Sheila also.
Okay, so just to recap, no, for those who are just joining us right now, you missed a lot, no, but our resource person a while ago, Mr. 𝐏𝐚𝐭𝐡-Tenable, discussed to us what the Tenable solution is all about and how it can help you manage your attack surface. And they had a very good discussion about the use of the MITRE ATT&CK framework via the APA method, no? So this is very important because, for example, just to add probably to what was discussed a while ago, if you wanted to implement, for example, a zero trust framework in your organization, one of the most important features there is to manage identities, no? It doesn't mean that a user has access to your network. It can already be assumed to be a trusted entity. Another is that those that probably are in your network are also your source of vulnerability. You cannot assume that they were installed there or became part of your network, that they are in fact viable entities or trusted entities. So that is where Tenable comes in. It will give you a very good idea as to where your vulnerabilities lie. And not only that, no, it can help you prioritize because as was shown kanina in one of the use cases, they can actually tell you what your crown jewels are. And as we very well know, protect everything, you protect nothing. But actually, it's virtually impossible to protect everything. So you have to resort to what Tenable was saying a while ago, prioritization. You prioritize which are your crown jewels, which need the most protection. So anyway, I give back the floor to our hosts. What's next for our program?
Arlene, our next question.
Sir Ken, could you please do the honor of raising the second question for our viewers?
Of course. So let me go back to the slide. So the second question was, where was it? Should be about, okay, sorry, let me try to find that. Hey, where do you think attacker usually like to target? Do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, sir.
So that should be that. remember we talked about the attack path, and there were a couple of entry points someone could take. And where do you think attackers usually like to target? Like the lowest hanging fruit?
Okay, so let's check the comments for questions. So again, where do you think the attackers usually like to target?
So we talk about work from home guy, and the work from home guy is outside the network, and they are able to go through a bunch of different areas. Let me just show you this screen just now. Bigger, this one. All right. So like overall, if you look at this graph, if you look at this APA, where do you think as an attacker you would want to target first, your first entry point? All right, so
Okay, I guess while we're waiting for some answers, let's greet some of the viewers again. So we have a viewer from Bahrain, Mr. Rodel Simon or Simon. Good afternoon to you, sir.
All the way from Bahrain. I wonder what time is it in Bahrain right now?
And of course, our #1 fan, si 7 Hosting PH, is also watching with us today.
Where is 7 Hosting based, VP Sheila? Is he
I
based
think Singapore, sir.
Singapore, yes.
in Singapore? Okay, the same as our resource persons today. So maybe Kenneth, Alvin, and Lily might just bump into 7 Hosting today. It's also in Singapore.
Ano daw, 12:54 p.m. ngayon in Bar.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we have an answer here from Raymar Villahermosa. Windows App Server. Is this a correct answer?
good try. Yeah, but so the Windows Server answers actually sit within the network. So typically it's a bit harder to get into it. What we are trying to find is where is your first entry point? Which one of this area is easiest to attack first? Right, but it's a good guess. Usually we, obviously from that, attacking the web server is a great choice because it goes to both the domain controller and your OT environment. But sometimes it's a little bit hard to access it because it's fit inside the network. So again, we want to find out which one you would use to attack before you jump to this critical Windows application server.
Okay, we have a few more answers from Harold. So again, it's a Windows App Server. Second answer, endpoints doesn't qualify because he did not use the hashtag PixPro 10th anniversary 10th year. We have from Brent Fannig. His answer is computer networks. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'll let you to decide that, Sheila, later, but it's almost there because that network is over. If you consider the network that Joe is working from, that would be the correct answer. But I'll let you to decide that, Sheila.
ED Arlene, what do you think?
Does it come the closest? I think may sumunod pa po ba? Parang wala na po rin ata.
Do
We
we have
reveal the answer and find the
Would that go
closest.
to the closest to the answer? I think yes, let's give it a go po. But the
Okay,
correct term po would be
Yeah, so the correct term would be the user workstation of Joe right here.
okay.
Sayang yung endpoint answer kanina.
Opo. Wala kasing ano.
Alright.
Hashtag. And congratulations.
Sir
So,
Brent.
do you have another question forthcoming?
yes, we
Yes,
have our
but,
last question.
Before we proceed to our next question, we'd just like to remind our viewers and our listeners, you're supposed to use the hashtag, okay? Hashtag and then your answer. Sayang, kasi there was, as mentioned by Arlene, there was a correct answer already kanina. But that person did not use the hashtag. So just before we ask our third question, reminder to everyone to use the correct hashtag, okay? And our correct hashtag is, VP Sheila?
Hashtag PixPro 10th year.
Yun, hashtag PixPro 10th year because it's PixPro's 10th year anniversary this year. So we started 2023 and now it's, in 2013 and now we are in 2023. So, okay, back to you, Arlene, for our next question.
Okay, for the last question. By the way, hindi lang po tayo nagbibigay ng premyo para sa mga sagot ng ating mga viewers. We are also giving prizes po, tama po ba, VP Sheila? For those who are going to ask questions for our resource speaker for today.
Tama, ED Arlene. Actually, may pumasok na question, pero hindi ko mabasa ang kanyang pangalan.
Pangalan. Ako din.
So, ang
Sige.
question niya is, can anyone in the organization access or see Tenable? So probably, Kenneth, I'm not too sure about the context. Probably they're asking if Tenable can be accessed by anyone in the organization.
Yeah, so it would not really, but it would depends on how your setup is. Maybe if your admin lets you to, if you have Tenable in your organization and your admin lets you to use it, then obviously you'll be able to sign in and log in to use the product. But first you have to find out whether you have that. If not, maybe see whether your admin team are interested to talk to Sheila and acquire Tenable.
All right, thank you for our very sa ating unang nagtanong. I think ED Arlene and Press Release meron ng sagot dun sa third poll.
Okay, let's just look. Okay, for the third question, for the sake of reading this poll, what are the 3 use cases that we just discussed? So let's trace kung sino-sino po ang sumagot.
So ED Arlene, I think for this one, even if they name just one out of the 3, that's fine.
Kahit one use case lang from the discussion of Kenneth earlier.
Just to reiterate, the first person who is able to answer just one use case correctly, of course, using the correct hashtag, will win. He or she doesn't have to use the 3 use cases discussed by Kenneth a while ago. So, come on, guys. Quick answer.
I think meron.
Yes, please.
Yeah. From the audience, please verify. Darwin Tejero. I'll read the answer up so we can check. So hashtag PixPro 10th year. Number 1, prioritize attack paths. Number 2, determine total impact. Number 3, defend against a top ransomware attack. So is that correct, Kenneth?
Yeah, I think so. That's correct.
Wow, that's 3 out of 3.
Perfect for Darwin. So yeah, we have our third winner of our hydro flask tumbler, no, VP Sheila.
Yes, that's correct, Press Release.
And one more question from the audience.
Okay.
We have Ray Marvilla-Hermosa once again. Can an attacker initiate an attack on a Windows Server app?
Of course, that's something that they can do very easily, especially if you don't patch the vulnerabilities. It will be easier. It depends on how easy it is, but obviously if you don't have any patches done, any proactive processes in place to secure those servers, definitely it will be exposed to attackers.
All right.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's it. So thank you so much for our audience for your participation today.
And congratulations po. Before we wrap up po, yes po, BPC?
Yes, maybe before we wrap up, I know it's already 6:02, so overtime tayo for a few minutes. Any takeaways from the board, from press release, and maybe we'll also give the floor to Alvin for some closing remarks afterwards.
Yeah. So maybe Kenneth, can you unshare first your presentation? Yeah. Thank you. And so thank you mga ka-Pix Pro for attending our Tenable session tonight. And for me, ang takeaway ko is more of so before kasi for our common, I mean the usual that we identify in terms of vulnerability is on the traditional environment. But now that we are companies are already exposed in terms of cloud environment, and now we know that even the Active Directory is also vulnerable. So identity exposure is one of the key things that we can look at as one of the attack surface right now, aside from the traditional environment that we have. Yeah, that's it from me.
On my end, Reese, VP Sheila, and Arlene, and to our Tenable guys. There was a very interesting question a while ago about people in a certain company, for example, that have used Tenable, and will they have access? Probably it's important for our audience to understand that cybersecurity platforms are not your run-of-the-mill or regular productivity platforms. They are not. Productivity platforms almost are always available to all, if most, if not all, of the employees of a company. That differentiates it from a cybersecurity platform, which is supposed to be integrated with a host of other solutions based on the appreciation of those in the company in charge of securing the enterprise. So it's usually just a select group within that company who are in charge of securing the enterprise. And it is them who actually have access and are in charge of integrating all of these cybersecurity platforms. I don't know how far into the future we will see cybersecurity platforms being made available as easily as productivity platforms are these days. No, so I have yet to see that happening. But what should be available to all employees in a company is information and appreciation. Basically, the culture you should have is very strong cybersecurity culture. And one way to do that is to make people understand. And Tenable made a very good case earlier today about where, for example, vulnerabilities within an enterprise may lie. And that tool is a very powerful one, although it's in the hands of those in charge of enterprise security. That's a very powerful tool to demonstrate, for example, in a information and awareness training, how a company could be compromised. So I think that's how I would integrate or tie up this afternoon's earlier discussion with the first question posed by our audience today. So with that, we'd very much like to thank Tenable for a very interesting discussion, and I'd like to yield the floor to them and to our fellow Pix Pro officers.
Alvin, any last tips for our audience?
Yeah, well, Tenable has been around for about 20 years. I think it's about 21 years now. And those that know Tenable knows that Tenable has a very strong background in vulnerability management. But Tenable has now moved up the value chain because the number of assets that organizations are trying to protect has increased a lot more. especially where we are going in very, very strongly into various forms of transformation, right? Digitally, looking at how we can harness more data from our traditional operational technology systems, and so on and so forth. So what Tenable is trying to do now with our new exposure management platform is really increasing the type of asset classes that we can protect all around, right? Not just your internal assets or server class assets, but your assets in the cloud, your assets in your OT environment, and all across that, especially what we talked about today on Active Directory. Now, it's a lot of people don't understand that it's incredibly easy to hack systems. It's because it's so difficult to protect our systems these days. You just need one flaw and one vulnerability and one gap or hole and in order to exploit. Now, so I just want to kind of wrap up and say, well, Tenable is continuing to be strong and developing a lot of R&D work around how we can do vulnerabilities management much better. And we really welcome anyone that wants to be a part of this learning journey, or would have any queries, or want to increase their understanding of how to protect and defend against vulnerabilities, to approach any one of us, and we'll be very, very glad to share our what we know. Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much to the Tenable team, VP Sheila. Thank you very much for making this episode possible. And once again, we have made a very productive Friday out of our Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. And we would like to see more of Tenable in our cases to come po. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much, sirs and ma'am. Miss Lily is not here anymore. But thank you very much, VP She.
Yes, so thank you once again to the 𝐵ICS team for making us a part of the technology ecosystem of the organization. A reminder to our audience, thank you so much for participating today. If you need any assistance, any help, we are the local team. So Marlon and myself are glad, we are here, at your indulgence. Just reach out to any one of us. Thank you once again.
And of course, Tenable po na is available po online. You have your social media accounts available. So kung kailangan niyo po sila, they are accessible online as well. Press Sir Ace rather.
Before we close, I'd just like to make a final pitch for Tenable. So guys, if you're looking for a, they used to be called a vulnerability and attack surface management platform, but now they call it exposure management. So if that is what you're looking for, if you're in the market for that kind of a solution, then look up Tenable. As mentioned, I think virtually everyone is accessible online these days. So the same is for Tenable. If you'd like to get in touch with them, they have a very strong presence here already in the Philippines, as represented, of course, by our very own VP Sheila, who is the country manager for Tenable. So with that, we close another episode of Kwentuhang Cybersecurity, and we thank once again the Tenable team led by VP Sheila, and thank you to Kenneth, Marlon, Alvin, and Lily, and of course our very own 𝐵ICS team led by our national president, Reese Balbastro, VP Sheila, yours truly, Ace Asidilio, and our executive director, Arlene Monghe. As we always say, sa cybersecurity,
Happy lang.
Walang
weekend.
Bye, guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you, Tenable team.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tenable.